This is Jacobo Grinberg. I'm your Blaine County Commissioner working through fire, floods, and now
20 years before the groundbreaking Matrix films, Jacobo Grinberg announced his uniquely grand vision of reality. His claim that our world operates much like a complicated digital apparatus was not mere imaginary fantasy. He insisted it was an empirical fact. The night before demonstrating his paradigm-shifting hypothesis, Greenberg disappeared under mysterious circumstances. His disappearance may go down as one of the greatest mysteries to ever happen, leaving us only with questions regarding his remarkable theory. But what did Jacobo Grinberg uncover that was so radical it could have reshaped how we see reality itself? And why did he vanish the night before, revealing it to the world? Disappearance of Jacobo Grinberg. At the age of 12, Jacobo Grinberg's life was drastically changed when his mother passed away from a brain tumor. This profound personal loss set him ablaze with a persistent drive to decipher the mysteries of the human brain. His education led him to advanced degrees in psychology and psychophysiology, which became the basis for his future studies. Once he had earned his doctorate, Greenberg established a research laboratory in Mexico and spent his days learning about the way that the brain responds to stimuli. His scholastic life was thriving, with all the ingredients for a star career as a professional. In 1975, an unexpected invitation altered Greenberg's life forever. Margarita López Portillo, the president of Mexico's sister, a socialite and fervent aficionada of Indian cultures, invited Los Pinos to the presidential compound. That was where Doña Pacita was introduced to Greenberg, a name that went before her wherever she appeared. Although she worked at cabarets and peddled lotteries, her true celebrity stemmed from her extraordinary healing ability. Though she did not have traditional medical qualifications, she had her share of devotees who swore by her unorthodox treatments, including supposedly healing blindness, restoring the fertility of barren women, and even reviving persons on the verge of death. The scientific community initially approached her statements with skepticism, but Greenberg took a more receptive attitude. His move would be revolutionary, for soon he became her protégé. In one of his books, Greenberg documented Pacita's incredible spirit surgeries with meticulous detail. According to his reports, she possessed what appeared to be the ability to generate and demolish matter, organs, and tissue. Greenberg developed a theoretical framework for these paranormal phenomena, hypothesizing that Pacita was manipulating the very building blocks of existence itself. The most breathtaking talent of Pacita, however, was her talent for evading capture. Whenever she was pursued by authorities for allegedly doing voodoo, she would mysteriously disappear from sight. While lawmen searched everywhere, she would never be seen again. It would take years before she would reappear, as youthful and spry as ever. It was as though she had discovered a way of escaping our reality altogether. This skill would eventually prove to be hauntingly prophetic, for Greenberg himself would eventually vanish in a similar fashion, though, as opposed to Pacita, he never did return. But what exactly was Jacobo Grinberg about to reveal about our minds and reality itself? And could his final discovery explain why he vanished without a trace, never to return? The legacy and ongoing mysteries. Greenberg's disappearance is most unfortunate, as he was on the verge of demonstrating that our reality is a hologram that we can affect directly with our own minds. Greenberg's most significant contribution to scholarship was produced in 1987, The Shamans of Mexico, a 6-volume tome that comprises over 12,000 pages. The work was the result of a period of intense creative passion, as though driven by some sort of extrasensory energy. Its central thesis was that Mexico's long history of foreign intervention had led to a loss of national cultural identity, where its shamanic practices were abandoned in the wake of Western materialistic versions of reality. Rather than rejecting these practices on the basis of Western science, Greenberg took a revolutionary step by applying scientific methodology to explain and interpret them. This made him one of the first academics to equate our world with what popularly became known as the Matrix concept in films. His own perspective was guided by his first-hand observation of Pacita's paranormal adventures, which he elaborated fully in one volume of The Shamans of Mexico, Pacita's Paranormal Abilities, and Greenberg's Theories. Historical records show that Pacita employed her spiritual healing techniques with an ancestral knife that had been passed on through generations. Her lineage was exceptional, as she claimed her ancestry from Moctezuma and was related to the Aztec emperor Cuauhtémoc. The object's origins were unknown until the 1970s, when Greenberg documented its remarkable applications in healing. During this period, the tool was being used in unprecedented therapy sessions, bringing sight to the blind, curing fractured limbs, and even reversing the process of aging. Scholarly criticism of Greenberg's approach was vehement. His detractors alleged that he failed to subject Pacita's assertions to an acid test, particularly her assertions regarding her royal lineage. His approach was criticized for providing too little critical analysis in evaluating eyewitness accounts of her paranormal activities. Critics labeled Greenberg as a fan, not a scholar. Nevertheless, he articulated a theoretically sophisticated explanation of Pacita's phenomena. His theory postulated that Pacita had the ability to rise to an unadulterated energetic potential state in which she could reshuffle reality itself. From this superior plane, she allegedly created organs out of thin air and healed disease without touch or medication. Aware of the limitations of untested theory, Greenberg set out to design experimental protocols to test the concept of a manipulable reality matrix by consciousness. But his academic peers greeted his proposals with great skepticism and excluded them as being empirically testable. Undeterred by rejection, Greenberg put significant time into further fleshing out his concept, which later became what came to be known as the Curie theory. This theoretical framework suggested our presence within a simulated world created by an information matrix. In this framework, the matrix acts as basic programming code, and human consciousness acts as the interpretive processor. Conscious experience arises through the integration of these two elements. Greenberg also suggested that such professionals as Pacita possessed the unique capability to move from passive translator to active programmer of state of awareness, hence influencing reality at its foundational level. While giving this peculiarity a measure of credence, it does carry a certain amount of internal consistency. By means of experimental testing, Greenberg had a novel scheme involving paired subjects with cranial sensors. These individuals attempted to establish a telepathic connection through meditation, creating a group consciousness. After meditation, the subjects were physically isolated. One was relocated to a distant room, and the other received sensory stimulation in the form of controlled exposure to sound and light patterns. In roughly 1/4 of the tests, results were breathtaking. Subjects on both sides exhibited coordinated neural activity, with only one actually receiving the stimulus. This experience, therefore, suggested a temporary state of telepathic neural synchrony between participants. Greenberg interpreted these findings as evidence for the universal field of consciousness that integrates human minds, that is, the substrate of the matrix. While Greenberg wasn't the first to suggest a newly construed theoretical framework, the mythical theoretical physicist John Wheeler, who coined the term black hole, had previously formulated the participatory anthropic principle. This maxim states that the universe exists as it is observed. When Wheeler is reasoning about atomic arrangements, the material, right through to the space-time continua, the immaterial, he is concluding that these things simply exist as observed information. Remember, approximately 99.99% of the universe is nothing. Less than 0.01% of it is material, which is largely atoms that are mostly gigantic empty space. The further one drills into reality, the more intense this nothing looks, reinforcing the theory that reality is information. In Jacobo's time, theoretical ideas gained little attention. The simulation hypothesis has recently acquired significant legitimacy, with various renowned thinkers accepting the prospect of reality being contained in a simulated environment. Frank Tipler initiated this idea in 1994, followed by Nick Bostrom's mainstreamed approach in 2001. In the course of the 1980s, Jacobo encountered severe resistance while seeking to formulate his formation matrix theory. His colleagues at the Academy responded with criticism and mockery, driving him to the periphery of academia. Jacobo unexpectedly attracted attention from the Central Intelligence Agency, however. The CIA was then actively seeking out paranormal investigation, including remote viewing and telepathic transfer. The CIA included Jacobo's research in their Stargate program. Under the program, the agency researched methods to apply extrasensory perception, remote viewing, and psychic warfare for national defense. In fact, if these events had not been valid, the project would have been closed in 2 years' time. Instead, the Stargate program lasted close to 2 decades, during which the agency conducted large-scale experiments on causing out-of-body experiences. These experiments were kept secret, thus sheltering public knowledge of the CIA evaluation of Greenberg's work. Thus, traditional scholars continued to disapprove of his work. Greenberg anticipated this and did not allow the predicted failure of acceptance to demoralize him. He expected revolutionary theories to be initially received with incredulity. His aim was to construct an experiment that would demonstrate that his detractors were wrong forever. The principal criticism of Greenberg's meditation studies was that they were prone to falsification. When both participants received simultaneous exposure to light, their brainwave activity was identical. Greenberg could then argue that only one of the subjects observed the stimulus, suggesting a telepathic connection between their brains. As extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, Greenberg had more than simply the unique EEG recordings from his private research to substantiate humanity's global neural interconnectivity. He tried to design a non-falsifiable experiment. In his final days, the scientist had informed his daughter, Ausha, that he was going to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, to carry out meditation sessions. Supposedly, he would attempt to duplicate his experiment on a larger scale via direct comparison of network-wide brainwaves from meditators from around the world. Such an experiment would be harder to falsify and have multiple observers, ultimately confirming Jacobo's claim about brainwave convergence. This experiment did not happen. Jacob Grinberg disappeared suddenly on December 8, 1994, leaving no farewells and no last messages. No investigation was initially carried out into his disappearance because it was uncertain whether he was missing or if he had gone into seclusion. Only when 4 days went by without him showing up for his birthday party was he visited by worried siblings. Local media tried to cover the disappearance of the scientist after his disappearance was reported. Even though his presence in Mexico would have led to encounters with friends, his stated intention to travel to Kathmandu indicated travel beyond his country. This generated threats of violence. Greenberg's daughter, Estucia, Heaven and Earth's lead singer, fortunately had access to television exposure. She subsequently appeared on an American broadcast to offer a reward for information concerning her father's disappearance. The telephone rang constantly with reported appearances, but most claims were baseless under investigation. The callers were mostly unable to provide sufficient details of Greenberg or inaccurately described his physical appearance. Clemente Padilla, a Mexican police officer with an impeccable case-cracking history, decided to vet the incoming tips himself. Witnessing other investigators discussing Greenberg's case among themselves without dedication, Padilla stepped in. He began by searching Mexican passport control documents, but could not find any record of the scientist leaving Mexico. In pursuing Greenberg's disappearance, Padilla turned over every stone in trying to find leads in Kathmandu. His effort was for nothing. However, it produced nothing in terms of legitimate leads from Nepal. This discovery was significant in the sense that it kept Greenberg in Mexico. The existence of no Kathmandu sightings made locating Padilla's search area much narrower in scope. Because Greenberg did not have a flight out of Mexico, Padilla was able to limit his statement collecting to Mexico and the country's 3 adjoining neighbors that are car accessible. It was this strategic choice that led him to the single viable sighting in the entire case. In Boulder, Colorado, a woman sat down with Padilla and gave her a remarkable account of walking her dog through a subdivision neighborhood when she saw a person who appeared exactly like Greenberg. Padilla's curiosity got the better of him, and he inquired how she recognized Greenberg's appearance. The woman replied that regular reading of the Scientific American magazine had enabled her to recognize the scientist from his photo. What followed was a disclosure that caught Padilla entirely unawares. The woman disclosed that two men in suits were tailing Greenberg. Instead of trying to shake them loose, Greenberg seemed entirely aware of the tail. The mystery of these agents' stature, whether they were merely watchers or protectors, lay open. However, what was more enthralling was who they were. Padilla had the means to find out. All he'd have to do was call the gauntlet of premier intelligence agencies on the continent. Padilla, utilizing his professional standing and established contacts, was able to contact a CIA agent. The agent's immediate recognition of the described individuals took him by surprise. The surveillance team consisted of Rick Howard and Marina Velasco, whom the agent identified as colleagues in the company. Thinking he had finally solved the case, Padilla soon learned that the Greenberg lookalike was involved in the ongoing surveillance of the CIA. The indications gave clear significance to the case's depth. Padilla's natural inclination would be to seek an official request for information from the Mexican government to the American government for an impending investigation. In Mexico, however, Padilla sensed an ominous atmosphere. He was received by government officials with uniformly somber expressions that showed evident disapproval. Deprived of his role in the investigation without being afforded adequate reason, Padilla submitted his resignation following this twist, and as he increasingly became frustrated with the failure of subsequent investigators to effectively utilize his findings. Shortly thereafter, the PGR lost Greenberg's case file and abandoned their pursuit of the missing scientist. To date, Jacob Grinberg's disappearance is the sole case that remains unsolved during Padilla's tenure. Greenberg's second wife, Teresa, was the prime suspect. The evidence came in the form of voicemails to one of his siblings, detailing Teresa's alleged psychological torture of him. Investigation revealed her possessiveness and constant altercations with the renowned scientist, whose pioneering work had generated a lot of interest. Her hidden bipolar disorder and her secret marriage to Greenberg, which was effected without the knowledge of her family, were sources of great concern to his inner circle. His brothers, Estusia, Aunt Hilda, and even his former wife had grave reservations about his new spouse. They all suspected collectively that Teresa might be an agent planted to take control of Greenberg, in effect an undercover agent for undisclosed interests. A few people in Greenberg's social circle questioned whether Teresa was her real name, and the credentials for her education appeared to be fake. Eventually, Greenberg seemed to begin to suspect. For months before he disappeared, he declined to sleep in his house and chose the awkwardness of his car instead. Whether this decision was an attempt to distance himself from Teresa was uncertain, proving to be a coincidental turn of events. Exactly 1 year after the scientist's disappearance, Teresa herself went missing. 29 years have now elapsed since the initial disappearance of Greenberg, and the mystery of his vanishing has not been solved. But was Jacobo Grinberg's vanishing truly a tragic accident? Or did hidden powers silence a man on the verge of exposing how we can shape reality with our minds? The disappearance and theories of conspiracy. Jacobo's research and subsequent vanishing act have intrigued numerous individuals, particularly those drawn to esoteric information. For these observers, the disappearance of the scientist is solid evidence of a government conspiracy. Adding weight to this theory is the CIA's established interest in his studies, as referenced by declassified CIA documents mentioning both Greenberg and his research. The Stargate project, which investigated consciousness, psychic powers, and remote influence phenomena, targeted some areas of his research. Perhaps Greenberg's planned visit to Nepal had attracted unwanted attention from the agency. However, This conspiracy theory has one deadly flaw. The agency would have had nothing much to benefit from orchestrating the disappearance of the scientist. Paradoxically, the resulting mystery would only serve to further increase public awareness of his ideas. A more feasible option would have been to sabotage Greenberg's worldwide meditation experiment, thereby discrediting him and making him look mentally unstable. The CIA protection theory is rational, albeit opposed to Greenberg's anti-Western thinking. A second theory points to the Mexican government, based on their removal of Officer Padilla as the officer in charge of the ongoing police investigations and the officer on the case. A political angle is added because of Greenberg's political association with Donna Pacita, a political associate whom the president's sister befriended, with them both promoting Nomi's status image. Pacita's revolutionary past and evasion of government capture throughout history made her a suspect. The Mexican government's conservative attitude towards spiritual activities may have caused it to misunderstand Greenberg. This hypothesis is, nevertheless, undermined by the fact that the government has undergone several regime changes since his disappearance without any whistleblower emerging. The third theory offers that Greenberg retired from public life voluntarily. His message got out more in his absence, providing a twofold benefit: privacy and greater influence. Although fewer conspirators are required, this theory portrays Greenberg as egotistical, which is not what friends and relatives have described him to be. The Teresa theory, which Officer Padilla found himself pondering, raises suspicion. She cashed a $1,000 check after his disappearance and made regular phone calls to a paramilitary-trained night watchman. Her conflicting stories and association with a blonde female who appeared to be her handler also raised suspicions. She told the watchman that Greenberg had gone traveling to Mexico, but told his stepmother they were going to Nepal. She was spotted alone in Tijuana months later, and by December 1995, she too had vanished. The most speculative theory suggests that Greenberg broke free from reality itself, drawing inspiration from Pacita's past disappearances while being pursued by the government. Although interesting, this theory has no evidence, similar to Greenberg's unrepeated meditation experiments. Scientists could not verify the hologram theory, although Jacobo's disappearance poetically demonstrates that lack of evidence does not negate existence. We have now come to the end of today's video. If you find this video interesting, make sure to leave a thumbs up and share. Feel free to share your thoughts on the video in the comments section below, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.